toldos is taken from the Navi Malachi, who is the last of the Nevi'im of the Jewish people. The Gemara says, Sof Nevuah Malachi, the last of the Nevi'im, is the Navi Malachi. Malachi lived at the time of the rebuilding of the Second Temple, when the Jewish people came back from Babel and began the rebuilding of the Second Temple of the Second Commonwealth. He was one of the Nevi'im. There were three Nevi'im at one time, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and he was the final one. It's a matter of opinion in the rabbis, in the Gemara, as to who Malachi really was. There is an opinion that the Talmud mentions that he is Mordechai, the famous Mordechai from the fame of Megillas Esther. And there's an opinion in the rabbis that he is Ezra. Ezra, the scribe who wrote the book of Ezra, but even perhaps more importantly, was the founder of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, and the man that rejuvenated Jewish life in Palestine, and he and Nehemiah were the ones that built the second Beis HaMikdash and built the Second Commonwealth. There's a third opinion that he's just plain old Malachi, and he's the third person completely separate from the others. Interesting to note, I always find it fascinating that on a matter such as that, there can be a dispute. We know, we have exactly what he said, and we have his ideas and everything, but who he was, that matter is somehow left shrouded in the mysteries of history. But it's that way very often in Jewish life and Jewish scholarship. We have many famous works of scholarship which are completely anonymous. And even those that we do know the authors, we are always much more concerned with what they had to say than with the actual details of their public and private life. There's a famous anecdote that is told about the great Rabbi Dr. Azriel Hildesheimer, who was the head of the Hildesheimer Seminary in Berlin at the turn of the century, and who was a great biblical scholar and a great Talmud Chacham. Across the street from Hildesheimer's seminary was the famous Wissenschaft das Judentum, the institution that was established to scientifically examine Judaism and all of the great people of Judaism. And it was basically not a very religious institution. It was catered to the Reform viewpoint of Judaism. And once Hildesheimer was interviewed and was asked what does he see as the basic difference between his institution, which is on one side of the street, and the other institution, which was on the other side of the street, he said, after all, they are both scholarly and they're both devoted to Jewish knowledge, and what's the difference? So he said that if you want to know what Rashi said, then you have to come by me. If you want to know what color shirt Rashi wore, then you have to go across the street. An overstatement, but it's a clear understanding of where he was coming from, at least, and what he intended to do. So we find that even dealing with prophets, not just dealing with ordinary mortals, that a matter as to who was the prophet is also somehow not as important to us as what the prophet said. What he had to say, how he said it, and what his message was. That's something to be borne in mind in our studies here at the Tanakh. So this is the first chapter of the Navi Malachi, and it deals to a certain extent with the comparison between Esav and Yaakov, between the two brothers, which forms the basis of the story that is told to us in the Parsha of Toldos. Here we have one of the great problems of life, a problem that we know exists, but that's very hard to deal with. Here you have two children who are genetically the same. Not only genetically the same, they are fraternal twins. They come from the womb of the same mother. They are inseparable from the moment of conception. and they are raised in the same environment, in the same house. And you get two such varied results in just opposite sides of the pole. How do you explain it? The answer is we don't explain it. We just don't know. It's an element of personality within each and every human being, and also an element of free choice. Our rabbis use it for the example to say that you can choose to be the most righteous person in the world, you can choose to be the most evil person in the world. No one is predestined to righteousness, and no one is predestined to evil. And this is the example. Rivka grows up in the house of Suel and Lavan, and she comes out a fine, moral, upstanding, great, noble person. Esau grows up in the house of Rivka, and he comes out, Mr. T. He comes out just brute force, violence, cruelty, complete utter disregard for the future and for any values more than what the present moment implies. It's hard. It's very hard. I see it in yeshiva often. I'm certain everybody sees it in their own family. Every child is a world unto himself or herself. I always say in yeshiva we have 108 students, you need 108 yeshivas. That's really the truth. Everyone is different, but I'm always fascinated. Yeshiva, Baruch Hashem, has a lot of brothers. We go through, a family, or a family goes through us, depending how you look at it. And the brothers are all different. They are just all different. And it's an amazing thing. And sometimes you have a brother that comes in and announces to you beforehand. He says, I am not my brother. That usually is the case if the brother was a superior student. So he wants to put you on notice that you shouldn't hold him to that standard. But it is one of the inexplicable things in life. And educational psychologists have poured out a lot of ink on this matter. So we really don't quite understand the dynamics of it. We just know that is what happens. That's how people are. And that's why it's senseless, according to Jewish viewpoint, in terms of parenting, it's senseless for parents to take on needless guilt. Heartache we are bound to take on. That cannot be prevented. But guilt, what did I do wrong? Most of the time, it's not only a fruitless question, most of the time it's an inaccurate question. Because I did the same thing to the other one, and the other one turned out great. So, I don't know. Hard to feel feel one's way through this minefield. So the Navi begins. Masa Dvar Hashem El Yisrael. The word Masa meaning a burden of prophecy. The Navi Malachi, as the other Naviim, uses the word Masa as a term for prophecy. In modern day Hebrew, the word is used for an essay. A serious essay on a subject can be called a Masa, because it's a weight, it's a burden. Prophecy was not a light matter. It was not something that was frivolous. It was always a burden. It was something that was heavy. So this was the burden of prophecy to Israel, Biad Malachi, through Malachi. God says, now the style of Malachi, we have seen that every prophet has his own style, or her own style, and prophet is Torah, etc. So everyone has their own style. The style here is always a dialogue between God and Israel. The Navi quotes both, back and forth. So he begins by quoting God. Ahavti eschem umar Hashem. God says, I love you. Easily said, right? If you love me, then how come you're such an awful person to me? Then why doesn't it work? So the Jewish people said back, how do you love us? Where do we see your love? Some love. We have nothing but trouble from it. So God answers. Again, only Jews could structure such a conversation. The in the non-Jewish world, everybody walks around and says, God loves you. Right? But it's only their God, and only if you're behaving yourself the way that's not love. If you love somebody only when they're good, so then that's not love. Love is being able to put up with the idiosyncrasies and failings and sometimes badness of the other person. That's love. And so in Ribono Shalom, our definition of love is that the Ribono Shalom has an abiding love for Israel. No matter what we do, God still loves us. And it works vice versa. No matter what God does, we still love God. Again, our generation is an example of it. I always have that feeling that there still are Jews in the world. There still are Jews that are loyal to Torah. There still are Jews that care about God. So that's an expression of love, right? Because it's very easy to walk away from it. Very easy to walk away from it without being too much of an name dropper. But Jackie and I had dinner last week with Mr. and Mrs. Ely Wiesel, and when we visited Miami Beach. And we were talking about, we were comparing Nobel Prizes, and
we would vote to one.
Yeah, I know you would. I'm looking for the $300 grand. 1 month in the machine. So, I'm always struck, and I'm sure you were also struck, the man got up in front of the whole world, he put on a yarmulke, and he made a bracha, and he told me that they had not just kosher food for the dinner in his honor, but that he made them bring the kosher food from Jerusalem. He could have gotten kosher catering from Copenhagen. But he made him bring it from Jerusalem so that would also be present, and the king of Norway sat and ate kosher. It isn't that they gave him the fruit plate and everybody else it's a hunger fest. Right? Everybody ate kosher, right? They wanted to eat kosher. So I thought, here's a man that he's a graduate of Auschwitz University, right? Magna cum laude. And there would be no kasha on me, if he didn't put on the yarmulke, if he didn't eat kosher. I don't agree with it, but it's understandable in the framework of things. And yet, that's not the situation. And he can do anything in the world, right? Isaac Bashevis Singer didn't eat kosher. He can do anything in the world he wants to. And he chooses to do this, so then that's an expression of love of the Ribono Shalom. And even though, there's a lot of even though, and that really is a pasuk in the book of Eob. Eob says the Ribono Shalom, Ein yaktileni lo ayachel. Even when you kill me, God, I hold on to you. You're not going to shake me. And after they have the whole debate and the whole 42 chapters there, and they're arguing back and forth, in the end, God says, okay, I can't explain it to you. And Eob said, okay, can't explain it. So we have the relationship is somehow rebuilt. How? What? How do we explain what happened? The answer is that we don't explain it, but somehow the relationship of love between God and man is such that it can withstand even these most terrible of circumstances and events. And that's true in a person's private life, and that's true in the Jewish people's national life. So therefore, the Jewish people said to God, how did you love us? Where do you see your love? So God answers, listen, you had a brother Esav. Esav is easier to love than Yaakov. Esav's got more on the ball. Esav's the champion of the world. And you see that Yitzchak loved Esav. God says, and I chose to love you and not to love Esav. I always reminded of the couplet by the poet How odd of God to choose the Jews. Which says the point very well. God says, I could have, I don't have to play with the loser in the world. I can play with the winners. I don't have to also be a member of the minorities. And the Jewish people are tough people to deal with. Love is Yaakov, and I love Yaakov. Ves Esav sonesi, God says, and Esav I despise. The end will be that his hills, his mountains, his high places will be desolate. And his inheritance will be mountains in the desert, dwelling places of the jackals. The end is that Esau is destroyed. Now you have to have a long view of history of that. Because Esau has been on top so many times and for such long periods of time that it's unimaginable to us that he can be destroyed. I'm reading a very good book on Russia from 1914 to 1918. A passage through Armageddon by Professor Lincoln, who has made a study of Russia. So he writes there, the day before the Tsar was overthrown, he was the Tsar. He refused to make any commitment. He was the Tsar. It's never going to change. So he said the Romanovs have been in power for over 400 years. Why should it change now? The nature of all empire and of all autocracy is that it's never going to change. And therefore, we look, for instance, at the communist regime in Russia now, and we're convinced it's going to be that way forever, right? We're convinced that America's going to be forever, everything's going to be forever, but all of the world history shows us that nothing is forever. No one has lasted. I always think about that statue of the Emperor Hadrian that was on exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum in the exhibit of treasures from the Holy Land. So the curator himself mentions there that the irony of history is that this one statue is the only statue of Hadrian extant in the world. So, and this Hadrian, who so persecuted the Jews, who killed Rabbi Akiva, who killed the Asura Rabbi Malchus, who was such a tyrant, so he enjoys, quote, the benign captivity of the Israel Museum, unquote. That is ironic. In the long view of things, the Roman Empire, the only one that cares about the Arch of Titus are the Jews. Titus is long since gone. So that's what the Navi says. That the end is, what is the sign of the fact that I despise Esau is that Esau does not stand the test of time. He will disappear. He's not going to be around. And you will be. Kisomar Edom Mushashnu, the Noshu, the Nivne Chorovos. Edom, Esau will say, Mushashnu, we have been destroyed, but we're going to rebuild ourselves. Right? Noshu B'nivne Chorovos. We will come back and rebuild what has been destroyed. God says it never happens. No empire has ever rebuilt itself. No civilization has ever come again a second time. Nobody has ever returned to their old home country again. Only one people in the history of the world. Nobody else has done it. No second chance for Esau. Kolomar Hashem Tzvokos Heimel Yivnu Vani Eros. They will build and I will destroy it. Let them build. And Koru Lahem Gvul Risha. They will be called the borders of evil, the country of evil. They will be the people that God's anger is apparent upon them forever. They will never come back again. You won't see it happen again. You don't see England says today, let's build the empire back. No one even has the desire to do so, let alone the wherewithal to do so. Gone is gone. But Beinechem Tirena, God says, your eyes will see it happen. You will be present for it. You will see it. The Atem V'tomru, and you shall say, Yigdal Hashem, that God will become great. God's fame, so to speak, will spread throughout the world. Me'al l'gvul Yisrael, over and above all the boundaries of Israel. There's a great flap in the newspapers and in the media about our good friend Cardinal O'Connor. But he met with him, he didn't meet with him, it's official, not official. But everybody, in my opinion, at least everybody misses the point. Did you ever hear in the history of the world, that the Vatican and the Cardinal, should have to potchke with us? It's diplomatic protocol. It's not, the Jews are insulted. I didn't mean to insult you. And that's the point. The point is, that the Vatican has to come on to the Jewish people to celebrate Christmas. Now that's a remarkable, that's the theological point. That's a remarkable occurrence that no one speaks about. That is swept aside, but that is the craw, that's the bone that sticks in the throat. The problem is, the Cardinal needs an Israeli visa to come. You're talking about 1,500 years of church history dealing with the Jewish people. They never dealt with us that way before. Never happened before. Never. And they would never have imagined it to happen. And according to their theology, it can't happen. So, that's a problem. It is a problem. All of these things are momentous events. They are the fulfillment of prophecy, but God does it in such a way that we're able to take it, because if we saw it in all of its great trappings, then we would collapse. Our hearts would burst. That's the Barbanel says this, the Pshat, Shir HaMalos B'shuv Hashem Shiva Sion Ayinu Kecholmi. God will make us as dreamers when Zion is restored. In a dream, you can see a lot of fantastic things. You never die from a dream. Things happen in a dream that if it happened in real life, the person would not survive. But the dream, you can survive. Our subconscious is able to deal with it. So, we shall be as in a dream. Things will happen and we won't see it clearly. We won't see it for what it is, because we couldn't take it to see it. It would just be, it's too much to bear. So therefore God does it this way. He has to do it this way. Otherwise there's no way for us to deal with it. The Pope goes to Poland with less furor than the Cardinal of New York goes to Jerusalem. Somehow they all straighten it out. It's not a problem. Right here, everything's a problem. Now God says to us, Ben Yechabedo, a son is supposed to give honor to his father. Ve'eved Adonov, and a servant to his master. These imageries are used throughout the Tanakh, and we use them in davening. That's the relationship of God to the Jewish people. The relationship is either as a master to a servant or as a parent to a child. And we say that in the davening of Rosh Hashanah, right? Hayom hara salom, hayom yamid b'mishpat kol yitzur halomim im kevonim im ka'avodim. Either we are your children or we are your servants. But whichever way, those are the parameters of our relationship. So God says, if I am your father, I ain't quoting, and where's my honor? And if I'm your master, I ain't moroi. So a servant is afraid of his master. An employee is afraid of his employer. God says, and he has a particular complaint to the priests, to those who are in Jewish public service, Bozei Shmi, who defile my name. V'amartem, so you will say, B'med v'azinu Hashemcha, what do we do? What do we do wrong? So God answers, Magishim al mizbechi lechem begol. They put on my altar spoiled bread, rotten bread. V'amartem b'mege alucha. And then they say, well, why is God displeased with us? And he says, to God you are willing to give second best, third best. Whatever is left over, that's what you give to God. And whatever is first class, you take for yourself. When you say, Shulchan Hashem Nibzehu, you say, well, God's table, it's not so honorable. It's good enough. The old anecdote about the parent that gave the child 2 nickels, one to buy a candy bar. See how old the anecdote is. One to buy a candy bar and one to put in the charity box. And the kid goes skipping happily down the street, and one of the nickels falls from his hand and rolls down the gutter and into a sewer and gone. So the child is perplexed for a moment and then turns up and looks at heaven and says, well, God, there went your nickel. That's what the Navi is talking about. The Navi is talking about that type of priority, that God's table is second, right? Our responsibility to God always somehow takes a back seat. So you say to God, well, what have we done to anger you? I mean, we're doing our best. And God says, you're not really doing your best, because I see how you behave towards others. I see when you really want to do something. I'm always reminded of my friend in Chicago who for years, when we went to the yeshiva, could not get up for the minyan. Never got up for the minyan. After 10 years, the Mashgiach who took care of it could no longer bear it, so he cursed it. He said, you'll see, you'll have to get up for the minyan. And what happened is that the guy married the daughter of the largest wholesale vegetable dealer on the Chicago produce market. So then he took him into business, so the guy's up 3:30 every morning. But by 6 o'clock it's all sold out, so you got to be at the produce market by 4. So whenever I see him, Moish, he comes up to me and says, Mashiach cursed me. So he said, it's true, you can't get up. Rabbi, I can't get up. But you'll see, if you're in a business, if you're in something that you have to get up, you'd be surprised when you can get up. You can get up your whole life, you get up 3:30 in the morning. So that's the idea that the Navi advances here. Magishim al mizbechi lechem begolo. Right? They give this kind of bread. If you send up a priest who is blind, who is maimed, nothing wrong. And if you send up someone who is crippled or ill, there's nothing wrong. And the Navi, in effect, is saying the old Jewish problem that a person that is not successful in any other field of endeavor will put him into the Jewish field of endeavor, right? He can be the Jewish public servant. If he has any talent, he should be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, a businessman, something. But if he's